Hello, everyone. This is Jody, and I am going to give you an overview of a very quick nutshell version of permaculture. Jay thought it would be a good idea to help you with your travel planning as you are thinking of the things that you're doing and how permaculture relates to what you're doing. So hopefully this will give you a little bit more clarity for those of you who are not familiar with permaculture or only vaguely familiar with it. So I hope to give you a little bit broader sense and definition so that you can really understand how so much of what you're doing is so important and is so aligned with permaculture. All right, so what is permaculture? So permaculture started back in the 70s by Bill Mollison. So essentially what happened is he went out and had a cultural social breakdown and went out and hid in the woods in the forest for a couple of years, and then he observed what was happening in the forest. And then based on those observations, he applied those natural laws and principles and actions that were happening that he observed to our human societal systems. So when he came back, he said permaculture is about designing sustainable human settlements. It's a philosophy and an approach to land use, which weaves together microclimate, annual and perennial plants, animals, soil, water management, and human needs into intricately connected, productive communities. Okay, bit of a long sentence there. So what happened was he was a professor, and so he had a student, David Holmgren, who worked with him on this concept, developing and evolving this concept. And eventually David came up with the shorter description of consciously designed landscapes which mimic the patterns and relationships found in nature while yielding an abundance of food, fiber, and energy, provision of local needs. Okay, also a little long-winded. So as you can see, permaculture is a pretty complex thing to define. Ultimately, Bill was able to come up with a shorter version of it. It's the harmonious integration of landscape and people, providing their food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way. So better, a little bit more understandable. But as you can see, Bill and David certainly did not have marketing partners or a board of directors to try and appease with a definition and a quick elevator pitch understanding of what permaculture is. So that's what we've hopefully tried to do at the Resiliency Institute, is bring this understanding of what this concept actually is and why it's so important to our suburban urban areas, just to get people to understand it better. So one of the working definition that we were able to come up with after 3 months of brainstorming this, trying to get this extraordinarily complex concept down into a 13-word or less acceptable marketing tagline. We've got a nature-based design method used to create resilient systems for daily living, land, and community. All right, there's still a lot to unpackage in that, but at least you can say it all in one breath. And so essentially what permaculture, the word breaks down to, is permanent, meaning that it's perpetually sustainable, that, we're not depleting our resources and going to make things go extinct. Plus, it was originally plus agriculture with Bill Mollison's definition, but it's evolved to just be culture, because when you apply this concept to all of our human systems, it becomes culture, because we obviously need more than just our agricultural systems. It's how everything interacts together. So then it becomes permanent plus culture is permaculture. So, and the thing to remember about this whole concept is that it's nothing new. So essentially after Bill got back from his forest stay, he traveled around the world to observe what people were doing, primarily agriculturally, again, which is part of the reason for the foundation for the agriculture. And what he did is he picked ideas and concepts and actions that people were actually practicing and implementing across the globe and put them all together into this philosophy. So again, there's really nothing new or unique about this. It's just the thing that's unique about it is the way to think about it, which hopefully I will explain to you. So essentially what it boils down to is that with permaculture, you're essentially trying to create sustainable everything. And so what does that look like? So ideally want to try and relocalize everything, simply because the more local we can meet our needs, the less resources are required to, get what we need to survive. So, if we're buying our food from the grocery store, it takes a lot of energy to produce that food that's far away and transport it and process it and package it and sell it and all that through our grocery stores. So the same thing with our energy systems. If we have to use a lot more energy, if we're using these centralized plants, such as our nuclear plants or our coal plants that are far away, we have to generate a lot more energy in order to account for the losses that contribute for the distribution. So the more locally we can meet our needs, the more resilient we are. What else makes it sustainable is there's no waste. So if you look at a forest, there's no waste in a forest. Everything is used. And so this is where the concept of the problem is the solution, which is the primarily founding philosophy that Bill Mollison created as the foundation for this whole permaculture concept. Essentially, we're not creating waste. We wanted to design waste out of our systems. The more closed loop we can make a system, the less waste there will be. So the idea being that resources or waste from one stream become the resource for another purpose in another system. So, and when we do that, it obviously makes everything much more efficient. And the key to the efficiency of a permaculture system is that it's not at the expense of other things. So we have our efficient energy systems with our coal and nuclear plants, but those come at a high cost to other components in the system, such as our air or our water or our land, even through the mining processes. So the idea is that it's efficient, but it also is inclusive. So essentially, permaculture, it's a design system. So we are creating things. The whole purpose is that we as human beings create our world, and all of the systems that are employed to support us. So the point of being a permaculture designer is that everything is intentionally designed. So we are thinking about things and taking into consideration all of the components and things that are within the system. And it's integrated. So we are all about finding connections, which is very atypical of our current systems, which are very reductionistic. Everything functions in a silo. So, we have our educational system that is separate from our energy system, that is separate from our healthcare system. So everything is separate. And so what we are doing with permaculture is we're trying to integrate everything. Because when you look at things wide enough and broad enough and holistically enough, you understand that everything is connected. Nothing exists in isolation. So what we do with a permaculture design and approach and way of looking at things is we attempt to find the relationships within systems. So we try to find parts that are missing. We try to find connections that are missing. Um, and so that then we can redesign things and reconnect things so that they are more efficient and beneficial for us as human beings. So one example that could be that you can think about for this is if you look at religion. So there's various different types of religions across the globe, and you all are going to be experiencing different religious cultures on your travels. So looking at them, essentially, if you look at religion, they all ultimately come down to the same concept of a God, of one uniting being, component, entity, energy. So the key that we would do as permaculture designers, how we would look at that is we would find those similarities. What does this religion have in common with this one? So essentially, if you consider, the golden rule is pretty universal across all religions. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Take care of strangers. It's like take care of your fellow man. That's a pretty consistent messaging that's across all religions. And so what we would do is we leverage that to make a change. And so what we could do for that is building on that understanding of one another that builds the connections between people by understanding that we really are more similar than we are different. And obviously, the world becomes more collaborative when we all feel a connection to one another. Okay, so permaculture designs and philosophy is based upon nature's patterns or laws. So very similar to physical laws, such as the laws of thermodynamics and physics that we use for engineering. There are laws that biological systems follow. And what we do is we use those rules, which are essentially patterns in the way things behave. So a pattern is a way things behave in nature. So a living system, how a biological living system behaves and interacts in its environment. And we try to imitate those in our designs because just like we see in the forest or our human bodies or a plant, they're very efficient. There's no, waste is not created. And if it is, it's utilized for another part of the system that supports that being. So, simply like a plant, photosynthesis, the waste product is CO2 or O2, depending on what time of the day it is. But both of those components are utilized in the surrounding systems. So the more that we can imitate what nature is doing and how nature is behaving, the more sustainable and resilient and efficient the systems will be. So what are those in permaculture? So the rules or the laws, the biological laws that we follow, essentially are these 12 principles. These are David Holmgren's version. So Bill Mollison had a separate, they were broken out a little bit differently. I just like the way I like to present David's because it's a little bit more understandable for people so that you can actually see how we're applying things. It's a little bit more clear. But the key to all of this, though, that makes it so different from any other system or design approach that we as human beings have created is that it's based on ethics. Because essentially as a permaculture designer, we're creating human systems. We are creating things that are going to be supporting us as human beings that we need for our existence. So, whether that's the basics of food, water, shelter to our social connections, our economics, governance, education, those types of systems. When we create a system with permaculture, we use these three ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share, or some people like to say future care, in order to decide whether or not what we're doing is um, is it what nature would do? And if it's not, then it's not the sustainable choice to make, and so we would do something different. So I'll just give you one example here. So catch and store energy. So obviously plants catch and store energy. So they harvest the energy through photosynthesis, chlorophyll in their leaves, and they store it up in their leaves until it gets to the point where they don't need it anymore. And then the leaves die and they decompose, and then it becomes food for the plant to continue growth as compost. So if you look at each one of these, produce no waste, integrate rather than segregate, use small, slow solutions, use and value diversity, use edges and value the marginal, and creatively use and respond to change. These are all things that natural systems do. All right, so we can apply this to our human systems, and the foundational human system that we have when we're thinking of our culture as a whole is our daily living or our lifestyle choices. So I would like to tell people, without healthy people, you can't have a healthy culture. So by starting and designing your life according to these principles, you're going to build the most resilient life you can. So when you think about it, we as human beings, we're all designers. So we all have the same amount of time available in a day. We all only have 24 hours a day. So whether we are being intentional or not, if we are conscious designers, we need to design our lifestyles so that we have the optimal choices to be as resilient as possible, because then that will make us more productive in our society as a whole. If we practice self-care, which we always espouse as extremely critical, essentially you can't pour from an empty kettle. So if you don't take care of yourself, you don't have as much to give to others, whether it's a spouse, your family, an employer, your neighbors, your community, whatever scale you want to look at. If you aren't taking care of yourself, you don't have as much to give to others. So making sure that you are designing into your life ways to live the healthiest life, most balanced life as possible. Because when it's not balanced, that's only cutting into your own personal resources. And then as you lose those resources and you lose that balance, it skews your perspectives, which is where most people are nowadays. And it triggers us into a selfish survival, competitive mindset versus cooperation and collaboration. So it's very, very important that we maintain this daily lifestyle balance. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. And let's see, our land. So obviously the earth care ethic. So obviously our lives, all life depends on our land and our natural resources. So our water, the soil, biodiversity. So understanding that is critical. And what's happened in today's society with our current culture and the way that our systems are designed, everything has been designed to disconnect us from nature. So we go to the grocery store, it's like we're not out in our gardens every day, paying attention to the weather and the climate and, what's happening with our environment. We just go to the grocery store. We go from our climate-controlled homes to our climate-controlled vehicles to our climate-controlled work or school, shopping environments and, repeat it to go back home. So, the average person is only spending 7 to 9 minutes a day outside max. So we've become extremely disconnected from our natural environment. So one thing that's very important is to reestablish this connection with our natural world. So that's absolutely where travel comes into play and a lot of the adventures that you all are going to be experiencing. Because as you go and you experience these magnificent places in nature and you develop this sense of awe, there have been several studies that have shown that to have that experience, it increases our human capacity for compassion and it makes us feel more connected. And then when we have those feelings, when we've got that as a basis, it makes us more willing and interested in caring for that environment. So then it becomes possible to create the will to want to start to work on these land regeneration practices. So making sure that we are not depleting all of our natural resources, so that we're not depleting them, so that we're not wasting them. So the more connected we are to nature, the more appreciation we have, and the more willing we are to invest in the care of our environment. So, and then finally is our is community. So to build a resilient community, which addresses the ethic of fair share and future care, it's acknowledging that we are truly interdependent species. We can be self-reliant, but we aren't necessarily self-sufficient. It's very, very hard to be self-sufficient. If you think about your daily life, if you have any need for medication, glasses, there's a lot of reasons why we need each other as human beings. So the idea of a resilient community is to work to maximize our connections and our relationships with each other in our immediate villages. So, you've heard the saying, it takes a village. Essentially, when you have a village, when you have more of those relationships and more of those connections, it requires less work and less consumption. So if I know I've got a community garden and I do not have a green thumb, I don't know how to grow anything, but you know what? There's people in my community who do. If they can grow the food, well, guess what? I can certainly deliver it. I can cook it. I can prepare it. I can preserve it. There's other roles that I can play within the community to strengthen that community and make it more resilient. So by acting together and building connections, we become stronger. Essentially, it comes down to get to know your neighbor. So even if that neighbor is 3,000 miles away, if you walk a mile in someone's shoes and you really get to understand and develop that level of empathy with and for other people, that is what makes the solid connections and makes us truly resilient. So essentially why I'm so excited about this project that you all are doing is it's really building this opportunity to consciously connect and work on regeneration of our planet, whether it's our environmental regeneration or social regeneration, by actually going out and reaching and connecting with other people. The stronger we'll be. There'll be more motivation to work together and build a better world. So yeah, your journeys you're taking are a great way to leverage this opportunity. So you're going to be connecting on so many levels. You're going to be connecting with yourselves. You're going to be connecting with each other. And you're going to be connecting with the world. So you are absolutely touching upon all the critical components that are necessary. So I hope this helps you with your planning. And I wish you all a bon voyage. So thank you and Namaste.